So, here's the deal. I'm Emma. Just your average 26-year-old who crunches numbers for a living. Not exactly the stuff of fairy tales, but it pays the bills. Married to Jake, a guy who's managed to stick it out as a college teacher without losing his mind. He's 30, by the way. 4 years on me, but who's counting? We've got this cozy little setup, our own place, away from the world's drama. Or so I thought. Enter Laura, Jake's mom, a storm dressed like a Sunday morning. From day one, she made it clear I was about as welcome as a tax audit. First time I met her, she looked me up and down like I'd just crawled out of a bargain bin. "So, you're the accountant," she said, voice dripping with something cold. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, trying to keep it together. "Interesting," she muttered, turning to Jake. "I always thought you'd end up with someone more." That more hung in the air like bad perfume. I knew what she meant. Not fancy enough. My parents aren't exactly headline material, just hardworking folks. But Laura, oh, she expected her son to snag a princess, I guess. And there I was, Cinderella without the fairy godmother. Jake, bless him, didn't see it. Or chose not to. "Mom's just old-fashioned," he'd say, brushing it off. But every visit, every family dinner, Laura's jabs got sharper. "Remember Julia? Your ex? A lawyer, wasn't she? Such a shame you two didn't work out." I tried to laugh it off, focus on the good stuff. Like how Jake and I were building our own little world, job stability, a house, planning for a future together. But Laura's words, man, they stick to you like gum on your shoe. One day, we're over at their place for dinner. Laura's laying it on thick, praising Jake's accomplishments, how he's a shining beacon for the family. Then, with a smile that could freeze hell over, she turns to me. "And Emma, still playing with numbers, I see. How quaint." Jake finally piped up, "Mom, come on. Emma's doing great at her job." But Laura just waved him off. "Yes, yes, of course. We must all do what we can, I suppose." It was like living in a sitcom where you're the only one not in on the joke. Jake kept telling me to ignore her, that it didn't matter what she thought. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one getting the verbal side-eye every time we crossed the threshold. I started dreading those visits, the tension, the backhanded compliments. It was like walking into a minefield, blindfolded. But I sucked it up, for Jake. Love makes you do funny things, like tolerate a woman who wishes you were anyone but who you are. So, that's the scoop. Emma, the unsuitable bride, according to the queen bee herself. Living the dream, one snide remark at a time. But hey, at least it's our dream, right? And no high and mighty mother-in-law was going to take that away from me. Not without a fight, anyway. Life's got its own way of throwing curveballs, and mine came in the form of a peanut. Yeah, you heard that right. A tiny, inconspicuous peanut. Most folks don't think twice about munching on them, but for me, it's like playing Russian roulette. Found out the hard way when I was just a kid. A spoonful of peanut butter turned into an express trip to the ER. Since then, my life's been a never-ending game of what's in the food. Jake knows the drill. He's seen me whip out my allergy card at restaurants, interrogating waiters like I'm solving a crime. Does this have peanuts? What about cross-contamination? Some people get it, others look at me like I'm a diva making a fuss over nothing. Then there's Laura. First time we discussed my allergies, her eyes nearly rolled out of her skull. "You're allergic to peanuts?" she scoffed, like I'd just told her I was allergic to breathing. "And soy, and peas, and what else? Air?" Jake jumped in, bless him. "Mom, it's serious. Emma could end up in the hospital." Laura waved it off. "Oh, please. People eat peanuts every day. It's all in your head." I wanted to retort, but Jake squeezed my hand under the table, a silent plea to let it go. I let it slide, thinking it was a one-off. But no, Laura had to make a show of it. Every dinner invite became a gamble. She'd parade dishes around, boasting about how she'd made everything Emma safe. But there was always this edge in her voice, a hint that she was humoring me, playing along with my little problem. One time, she served this fancy dessert, all proud and smiling. Made it myself. Absolutely no peanuts, she announced. I was wary, had to be. You sure, Laura? You know my allergies are no joke. She rolled her eyes. Of course, I'm sure. What kind of monster do you take me for? That stung, but I went ahead, took a tiny bite, and bam, instant regret. My throat started itching, my skin flared up in red spots. Jake was on his feet in a second, panic written all over his face. Laura's reaction? Oh, must have been something else. You're always so dramatic. Dramatic? I was frantically fishing for my EpiPen, feeling like my throat was closing up. Jake was furious. This isn't a joke, Mom. Look at her. But Laura just stood there, a mix of shock and stubborn denial on her face. After that incident, Jake and I laid down the law. No more meals at Laura's if she couldn't take my allergies seriously. It was a whole thing. Jake arguing with his mom, me feeling like a burden, the whole 9 yards. But the kicker? Laura still acted like I was making it all up, like my allergies were a personal attack on her cooking or something. It's always something with Emma. I overheard her telling Jake one day. Can't eat this, can't eat that. How do you live like this? Jake, ever the peacekeeper, tried to explain it wasn't a choice, that my allergies were as real as it gets. But Laura, she just didn't want to hear it. Stubborn as a mule, that one. So yeah, peanuts. Who knew something so small could cause such a big ruckus? But here I am, living on the edge, one snack at a time. And Laura? She's still convinced I'm just being difficult. But hey, what's life without a little drama at the dinner table, right? Laura's visits to our place became more frequent than a bad sitcom rerun, each one with its own set of digs and jabs. It was like she had a checklist of ways to make me feel small, and she was ticking them off one by one. One afternoon, she dropped by unannounced, as was her style, catching me in the middle of my weekend relaxation mode, sweatpants, no makeup, and the house, well, lived in. Oh, Emma, she sighed, stepping over a pile of magazines I hadn't gotten around to sorting. I see we're still embracing the casual approach to housekeeping. I bit back a retort, counting to 10 in my head. Just enjoying my day off, Laura. Want some coffee? She waved off the offer, her nose wrinkling as if she'd just walked into a landfill. I'll pass. I doubt you have anything that hasn't expired. As I boiled water, out of spite more than anything, I couldn't help but feel the sting. You know, not everyone measures their worth by how clean their countertops are. Laura sked, eyeing the living room with disdain. It's not about worth, Emma. It's about taking pride in your home. But let's not pretend you'd understand that. The barbs were getting old, but what really got my goat was when she started in on more personal stuff. Stuff you don't just throw around in casual conversation. You know, Jake told me you two are trying for a baby, she began, her tone laced with something I couldn't quite place. Concern? Doubt? I just hope for your sake it doesn't inherit your propensity for health issues. I nearly dropped the kettle. Excuse me? Laura shrugged, a master of feigned innocence. Well, it's just that with your allergies and whatnot, it's a wonder you can function. Can't be too careful these days. The insinuation was crystal clear, and it hit like a sucker punch. My hands trembled with a mix of anger and hurt. My allergies have nothing to do with my ability to have a healthy child, Laura. Oh, darling, of course they do. But don't worry, she patted my arm with a coldness that could freeze hell. I'm sure there's still hope for you. Maybe. I was seething, every fiber of my being wanting to lash out, tell her off, defend myself and my future kids from her baseless judgments. But before I could formulate a response, Jake walked in, the picture of oblivious jeer. "Hey, what's up? Mom, Emma, everything okay here?" Laura transformed, the Ice Queen melting into a semblance of warmth. "Just having a little chat with Emma. You know, girl talk." I looked at Jake, my eyes screaming for him to see through the charade. But as usual, he missed the silent cues. "Cool, cool. Mom, you staying for dinner?" The rest of the visit passed in a blur of forced civility and biting my tongue. After Laura left, I turned to Jake, the frustration and hurt bubbling over. "Do you not hear the things she says to me? About us?" Jake, ever the peacemaker, sighed. "Emma, you know how she is. Just let it go, all right? It's not worth the stress." "Not worth the stress?" I echoed, incredulous. "Jake, she's insinuating our child would be better off not being born. How is that not worth getting upset over?" He didn't have an answer, just the same tired line about forgetting and moving on. But some things, some words, they stick with you, echoing long after they're spoken. And forgetting? Not as easy as it sounds. Life, as it turns out, has a funny way of throwing you for a loop when you least expect it. And sometimes, it's not a curveball, but a surprise so big, it knocks the wind right out of you, in a good way, mostly. I found out on a Tuesday. The sun was doing that thing where it's not quite ready to set, but you know it's thinking about it. I'd been feeling off for a bit, nothing major, just off. Enough that I grabbed one of those tests from the pharmacy. Just to rule it out, you know? So there I was, in our bathroom, staring at this little stick that had the audacity to change my entire world in the span of 3 minutes. Positive. I blinked. Looked again. Still positive. "Jake." My voice echoed off the tiles, a mix of panic and something I couldn't quite place. He was there in a heartbeat, the worry lines on his forehead already in full display. "What's up? Everything okay?" I handed him the test, my hands shaking. "Does this look positive to you?" He took it, squinting at the tiny window before his eyes shot up to meet mine. "Holy. Are you? Is this?" "Yeah," I managed, a laugh bubbling up from somewhere deep inside. "I think we're having a baby." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with 1,000 unsaid things, until Jake wrapped me in a hug so tight I thought I might burst. "This is amazing, Em. We're gonna be parents." Parents. The word felt foreign on my tongue, too big for me to fully understand just yet. But then, the reality of our situation crept in, the shadow of Laura's words lurking in the back of my mind. How would she react to this news? Would she see it as a miracle or just another thing to criticize? I voiced my fears to Jake, his arms still wrapped around me. "What about your mom? You know what she's been saying." He pulled back, looking me straight in the eyes. "Forget my mom, okay? This is about us, our family. We'll deal with her when we have to." Easier said than done, but in that moment, with the setting sun casting a warm glow around us, it felt possible. We were in this together, come what may. After the initial shock and joy had settled a bit, Jake suggested we call his parents to share the news. I felt a knot form in my stomach at the thought. Laura's reaction was the wild card I wasn't sure I was ready to deal with. Still, hiding it wasn't an option, and part of me hoped for the best. We started with Jake's dad, Michael. He picked up after the second ring, and Jake wasted no time. "Dad, we've got some news. Emma's pregnant." The enthusiasm in Michael's voice was palpable, even through the phone. "That's fantastic. Congratulations. I'm going to be a granddad." His genuine excitement was a balm to my anxious heart. If only we could bottle up his reaction and serve it to Laura. Speaking of the devil, it was her turn next. The call went on speaker, and after the usual pleasantries, Jake dropped the bomb. There was a pause, a long one, where you could practically hear Laura processing the news. Finally, she spoke, her voice lacking its usual sharpness. "Well, this is unexpected. We must celebrate. I'll organize a family gathering in a couple of weeks. Invite everyone to share in the joy." Her words caught me off guard. Was this the same Laura who critiqued my every move, who doubted our future happiness? Jake, however, didn't skip a beat. "That sounds great, Mom. We'll be there." I nodded in agreement, though no one could see it. What else could I do? Despite my reservations, this was an olive branch, wasn't it? Or a well-disguised thorn bush? Only time would tell. As we hung up, Jake was beaming, caught up in the excitement of becoming a dad and perhaps, naively, the hope that his mother's reaction signaled a change of heart. Me? I was more cautious, the skepticism a hard shell to crack. As I lay in bed that night, Jake's steady breathing a comforting rhythm beside me, my mind raced. What would this family gathering hold? Would it be a genuine celebration, or was I walking into a lion's den, dressed up as a baby shower? Laura's sudden shift from ice queen to gracious hostess didn't sit right with me. But, for Jake's sake and our baby's future, I was willing to play along, at least for now. The upcoming holiday loomed large in my thoughts, a mix of hope and unease swirling together. What would be waiting for us, indeed? Pulling up to Jake's parents' place felt like stepping onto a stage, the evening set for a performance with an audience of family members ready with their congratulations. The warmth from their well wishes was genuine, a stark contrast to the usual chill I felt from Laura. Yet tonight, even she managed a smile that seemed less forced than usual, her congratulations carrying a hint of something resembling happiness. But it was Michael, Jake's dad, who caught my attention, his usual bright demeanor replaced by a shadow of unease, his smiles fleeting and distracted. As we all gathered around the table, laden with more dishes than a holiday feast, I played it safe, sticking to the foods I knew were clear of my laundry list of allergies. That's when Laura, in a move that felt out of left field, gestured towards a sweet pie. "Emma, I made sure this was something you could enjoy. Special, just for you," she insisted, an edge of eagerness in her voice that I couldn't quite trust. Tentatively, influenced more by the hope of peace than appetite, I reached for a slice. But before it could even land on my plate, Michael's hand came out of nowhere, sending the plate, pie and all, crashing to the floor. The room fell into a stunned silence, every eye on us, Laura's face draining of color, her shock mirroring our own. The moment the plate hit the floor, breaking the silence like a dropped glass in a quiet room, Jake turned to his dad, his voice tight with confusion and anger. "Dad, why? Why would you do that?" Michael stood there, his usual easygoing demeanor gone, replaced by a seriousness that seemed out of place on his normally jovial face. The room was dead silent, everyone's eyes ping-ponging between Michael, the shattered plate, and us. Then, Michael's voice, usually warm and inviting, boomed across the living room with an intensity that made more than a few relatives flinch. "I can't be part of this crime," he declared, his eyes locked on Laura, who looked like she'd just seen a ghost. "You did what?" Jake's voice cracked, disbelief etching every word. Michael's next words felt like a punch to the gut. He pointed squarely at Laura, picked out and made dishes with peanuts and other stuff Emma can't have. She knew. She hoped it would hurt Emma, maybe even cause her to lose the baby. The silence that followed was suffocating. All eyes slowly turned to Laura, whose face had drained of color, then flushed a deep red, caught in the act by her own husband's admission. Laura, for once, seemed at a loss for words, her usual quick comebacks and sharp tongue nowhere to be found. The room felt frozen, the air thick with shock, disbelief, and a growing sense of outrage. Laura's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked from Michael to Jake to me, the realization of her actions and their consequences finally sinking in. The rest of the family started murmuring among themselves, the initial shock giving way to a chorus of disapproval and disbelief. Words like unbelievable and how could she bounced around the room, painting Laura as the villain in her own home. As for me, I stood there, rooted to the spot, the gravity of what Michael had revealed weighing heavily on me. The thought that Laura would go to such lengths, that she hated me so much she would risk my health, my baby's life, to get rid of me, it was too much to process. In the aftermath of Michael's shocking revelation, the room was enveloped in a stunned silence, broken only by Jake's incredulous and angry voice directed at his mother. "Mom, why do you hate Emma so much? What has she ever done to you to deserve this?" Laura's response was nothing short of explosive. "I can't stand her," she screamed, her voice laced with venom. "She's not right for you, Jake. She can't give you healthy children, and she's not worthy of being a part of this family." Jake's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before, his usual patience and tolerance for his mother's antics evaporating before my eyes. "That's enough, Mom," he barked back, his voice shaking with anger. "I can't believe you would go this far. I don't want to see you anymore. You're not the mother I thought I knew." The car ride home was tense, the air thick with unspoken words and heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. Once we were home, Jake turned to me, his expression softening, the earlier anger replaced by remorse. "Emma, I'm so sorry," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "I should have stood by you sooner. I should have seen how toxic things were. I can't believe my own mother would do something like this." I could see the pain in his eyes, the struggle between his loyalty to his family and his love for me. "Jake, it's not your fault. We couldn't have known she would do something like this," I replied, trying to offer some comfort despite my own swirling emotions. But the damage was done. The relationship between Jake and his mother, once unbreakable, was now fractured beyond repair. Laura had become a pariah not just to us, but within our wider circle of family and friends. Her actions, driven by irrational hatred and unfounded fears, had isolated her completely. Michael, who had stood up and revealed the truth at the risk of his own marriage, eventually found it impossible to stay with Laura. The divorce wasn't immediate, but it was a foregone conclusion. Living with someone capable of such malice, who had plotted against their own unborn grandchild, was more than he could bear. Life, as they say, finds a way to march on, dragging us along for the ride, ready or not. After the storm settled, Jake and I found ourselves back in the rhythm of our daily lives, but with a newfound appreciation for the quiet moments of peace and an eagerness for the future, especially with our little one on the way. Michael, Jake's dad, became something of a fixture around our place. His presence was a balm, his willingness to help out around the house and his excitement about becoming a granddad were infectious. It was nice, having him around, feeling like we were building a new kind of family unit, one built on mutual respect and understanding rather than obligation and expectation. "We're really doing this, huh?" Jake would say, hands resting on my belly, a smile playing on his lips. "We're going to be parents." "Yeah," I'd reply, the reality of it all washing over me in waves of joy and nervous anticipation. "We're going to be great, you'll see." As for Laura, her name rarely crossed our lips these days. The wound she'd inflicted was still too fresh, the betrayal too sharp. Yet, whispers of her new life would occasionally find their way to us through the grapevine. Living in a small rented apartment, returning to the workforce after decades, it was a far cry from the comfortable life she'd once commanded with such authority. I'd be lying if I said I felt sorry for her. There was a time when I might have, when empathy for her situation would have come naturally. But after everything, sympathy was a hard sell. The choices she made, the malice with which she tried to tear our little family apart, it was unforgivable. "It's a shame, really," Michael would say on occasion, a distant look in his eye. "She made her bed, though." "Yeah," Jake and I would agree, the subject quickly changing to more pleasant topics. There was no joy in dwelling on Laura's downfall. Our focus was on the future, on the arrival of our child, on the family we were building together, one filled with love and devoid of the toxicity that had once threatened to consume us. "We've got each other," Jake would remind me, his hand finding mine, a silent promise of support and solidarity. "That's all we really need." And he was right. As we waited for the birth of our child, hope was a constant companion. Hope for health, for happiness, and for a future where the shadows of the past were just that, shadows, faint and inconsequential against the brightness of our new beginning.